G'day everyone, this is Inka here. Welcome to Investor Journeys, where we chat with everyday Aussies and seasoned investors about their property journeys, the wins, the stuff-ups and everything in between. Whether they've got one property or a whole portfolio, we dive into how they did it, what they've learned and what their journey's been like so far. No fluff, just real stories from real people. So let's get stuck in. G'day everyone, welcome to the IJ podcast. I've got a very special guest today. It's someone I've known actually now for a few years. She's very prominent in the property industry at the moment. She's spreading awareness all over the country, doing seminars, podcasts, trainings, just getting people to learn more about property and property management. And no doubt she'll tell you more about it. So welcome, Ashleigh. Welcome to the podcast.
Thanks for having me. I always love hearing people's intro, how they see me and describe. So, it's always good to hear your version.
Yeah, look, I'm sure you'll explain more about it. I mean, I know you more about as my property manager because you manage a few of our properties over in the Western of Australia. And do you want to just tell us a little bit about yourself and what you're doing at the moment in terms of being in the property profession?
Yeah, so I'm still trying to work out the way to simplify my life a little bit when I describe it to people. But if I put it into three categories, I own SoCo Realty, I run property profiling, and I also run PM Collective. So they are all real estate relevant. SoCo I've had since I was 23, so for 20 years now, and started off with myself and my brother-in-law, who I would say is as a brother. I've known him since I was 6 years old and he was 18. So my sister is older than me. And so we have run that business. We now have around 1,200 properties all over Perth, from Mandurah all the way up to Alkimos in Perth. So that's really great. I do a lot of the marketing and staff management in that business now. And then there was a need to do to help investors who are buying interstate. So that happened about 5 years ago with property profiling. And that's how that business was created, because I saw that there were a lot of investors who were buying but not understanding purchasing in WA, and it was a lot different from buying in Sydney or Melbourne and Queensland. So there was definitely a gap, an education gap. Now at that time, sales agents sort of didn't feel like it was their responsibility. They were like, if you're going to buy in Perth, you need to understand our rules. And so I found myself playing middleman a little bit to look after the investor, but just explain, no, the sales agent's right, this is the way we work. So that that ended up actually making me quite sick, because I was so busy. And when I sort of talk about the peak of that moment, I was probably taking about 70 calls a day for investors just buying in Perth. And I had to work out a way to either give the business to someone else to share the load, because I just couldn't cope with it all, or to create a business out of it and put some processes and some boundaries in place. And that did involve paying for pre-purchase inspections and time on the phone. So that's how that all started. And then PM Collective is a training platform for property managers. So something that I really enjoy training is with property managers is to get them out of that transactional space and get them to be more of an investor advocate. And I think that 5 years ago, when we had that crazy investor market, clients were wanting more than just a property manager to collect rent and, do maintenance. They were needing so much more support, more advice. And we've really, as property managers, had to change our role in the last couple of years to do that. Now, there's still a lot of agencies that don't and are very old school, but I have this saying that if you stay still, you might as well go backwards, because the industry moves so fast, our client expectations move fast, and you've got to stay on top of your game. So I now sort of try and teach property managers to do better and be better, and also to work with purpose as well, which I think is quite important. So I do a lot in the charity space as well. So that's sort of in a nutshell a little bit what I've been doing over the last 20 years, and mainly over the last 5. And very, very lucky to be in my position.
Yeah, I'd say you're probably, what, sleeping a couple hours a day or something like that from what you're telling me at the moment, but,
I'm very good at delegating.
yeah, no, well, that you gotta do that. You only got 24 hours in the day, and you've obviously got a family to look after as well, and I can imagine, especially over the last 5, 6 years, the Perth market had absolutely gone bananas. The rise of the buyers agencies as well. I purchased a number of properties, I think it was in 2022, where, I reached out to yourself personally, to manage for me, and I think I might have seen SoCo come up on some of the Facebook groups, and I thought I'd reach out. And you guys did an amazing job, and we actually bought a commercial property and got your brother Bill to come on that one as well. So he's done a great job, and yeah, I can imagine, because we were buying a lot of properties in Perth for our clients as well, and I reached out to you guys to get more feedback than just the usual, what do you think of the rent and all that kind of thing. There was renos to be done. There's so many things that you guys had to juggle, I'm sure, for not just buyers agencies, but yeah, just investors in general, because so many of them were interstate, I would presume, and they would be reliant on you to go check it out and do a lot there in that space. And would you say that at that time, Perth was, obviously during the 2015s and 16s, that time, was quite a sleepy time maybe in the real estate. But then as it took off, was it quite a surprise to you to see the level of interest in Perth and the amount you actually had to take on at that time?
Yeah, it happened so quickly, and I remember at the very start of it, I just thought, "Oh, it's a busy month." When I started getting these phone calls, what was actually really hard to navigate was how long was this gonna go for? Because
Mm,
you sort of go into that stage to go, like, if it's gonna just be busy for this month, I can handle it. But then you went into the 2nd month, and it's like, "Okay, surely it's just 1 more month." 3rd month, "Surely it's nearly over." And it didn't, and so that's where we got a lot of that burnout, and me personally, I got really, really sick during that time because you were just waiting for it to stop, because at any moment, the phone, people would stop, they'll shift states. So that was probably the hardest thing. How long is it gonna last for? And because I love to think about the future, do I need to put any steps in place for next month? With growth inside a business, a real estate business, I like to plan 3 months in advance. So generally, I know when I need to employ 3 months prior. But you sort of don't want to employ if it's going to stop tomorrow as well. So that unknown was really hard. I mean, it ended up going for about 2 or 3 years, I think. So we got by. But the other thing from a business point of view, and I think that now I do try to explain this to a lot of BDMs and business owners, that as quickly as it came in, it can go out just
mm,
as fast.
mm.
And so now it's sort of like, okay, we've had that growth. What are we going to do to maintain? One thing that happens in the industry so much is, and we found this as being a little bit of an issue, was people going on recommendations of their mate. Their mate did really well, so they want to buy where their mate bought, and then they take advice from the mate, and constantly goes on. So what I would love to do, and a project that we've got in our office, is with our annual investor audits, because we want people to take responsibility for their investments. On their own, in taking into account their personal situation, and not based on the experience of their mate, and to make independent decisions that are the best for them. So that's something that I'm really focusing on. And it's actually, to be honest, it's really to protect the business, because, like I said, came in fast. I'm very well aware that it can fly out fast as well. We started seeing a few owners start to sell, a few of them wanting to sell. They're realizing that sometimes having an investment property is quite stressful, and it's taken an emotional toil on them. So we, want them to hold on to the property for as long as possible. So as much as we can ease that stress, we're going to try to. So yeah, that was really, really hard to navigate back then, but I think we're all under control now.
Yeah, I think with real estate, all across the country, all the sales agents, the property managers, they'll all go through their different cycles. And especially with the way the Perth market went and all the investors and like I said, the rise of the buyers agencies, that really took off around the same time as when the Perth market did. And that's when there was a massive influx into there. So I can imagine the amount of workload that you had to take on. But then again, like you said, the real estate markets goes in cycles, and Perth by no means is it going down, but it's certainly stabilizing, I'm sure, from your point of view as well. And it can't just go on forever like that. So as a business, I can completely appreciate you can't just take on 50 people and then lay off 40 people. You've got to be able to maintain that during the next 5-10 years, and you're doing it a massive service in terms of being able to educate property managers out there. And I think as property managers are the unsung heroes, in my opinion. And it's not just because I've got you on. I've put this on a LinkedIn post before. They do so much work in the background, and they just don't get the credit that they deserve. I try and make it a point where I give feedback at the end of the year, whatever it is, to my property managers who've done a great job. And it's not a easy, thankful job. And props to you, and to be able to run a business and to do that for so long and educate other property managers as well. So well done.
Yeah, thank you. I try to talk about the behind the scenes stuff that property managers do, because I don't think people actually realize there's a lot of stuff we do that we don't put that burden onto the owner because we don't want to stress them out. But we would probably get 2 calls a week just from people separating and having to get involved with that domestic situation, and then counseling through it, and how are we going to manage this so that can the person who's staying afford the rent on their own if that person leaves, and just all of those personal situations that we shouldn't have to deal with, but we do, because we need to make sure we look after our investor and the property, and whoever's in there pays rent. It's really, really tough, but you don't tend to speak about that a lot, but it's a lot behind the scenes.
And absolutely, it's real estate is a very much a psychology game as it is buying property. To be honest, we go through the same thing. I'm sure salespeople go through the same thing. It's a really taking into a lot of emotions. It's a high purchase, high stress environment for a lot of people. So I can completely appreciate what you have to go through as a property manager. I've seen it, obviously over the last while that I've been property investing. So props out to all those property managers out there. But this podcast is, it's great to talk about, your business, but we want to talk about you, Ashleigh. So do you want to tell us, like briefly, just, a bit about your background, where did you grow up, and did you guys talk about property investment and property, and where did that all come in your life?
Well, I mean, I hate to really disclose where I grew up, because where I grew up is an area that that we invest in a lot these days, and that was Armadale. And I don't like to admit that I'm from Armadale, but I am from Armadale, which, for those that don't know, WA is considered a bit more of a lower demographic area. Not at the time I lived there, I didn't feel like that, but my parents, an accountant and a nurse, are very classic. Average income, and I think money mindset's a very interesting place to educate yourself on, because my experience with money mindset is that while my parents were just average income earners, I would assume, mum worked night shift in emergency, and dad sort of did a few different types of jobs, and as an accountant. They never really talked about money. So we never talked about how much money we've got, how we can't afford things. There was never a discussion about it. And if I wanted something, I could get it. But I wasn't a kid that also asked for a lot of things either, but I was never said no to when the time came. And one thing, though, I think from a probably the biggest trait I guess I picked up from my family is that they were both actually hard workers. So, and I would consider myself a hard worker. I've always worked very hard since I was sort of 14, 15. So that's sort of, I guess, how I grew up. So not really having much of an opinion. Otherwise, if you just work hard, you can have whatever you want. And I still say the same thing to this day. You just work hard and you can have whatever you want.
It's a running joke on this podcast where all of my previous guests I've known them from New Zealand. You're the first one that has actually originated from Australia. So welcome as the first Aussie on this podcast. Um, but yes, I know Armadale, and with your parents, it's a very familiar story. It's not like you're coming from riches there, it seems like, and from a massive investing background, and you've sort of got into it. So what got you into, when did you get into the property space, and do you want to tell us a bit about your first purchase as well?
Yeah. So, going actually just quickly back to my parents, they did have one investment property. So they did sort of have that classic one, which served a purpose when my parents separated when I was 18 and dad lived in that property and we sold the family home. So I guess there was always, that security that we did own our house and we did have one investment property, but you can never make money from having one investment property. You always need more. So I purchased my first place, which was actually with Bill and my sisters, and we bought a little villa in South Perth, and so I had about 25% in that. That was when I was 18. So the importance of investing probably came more from my older sisters who were 10 and 12 years older than me, because they were always, they bought a property and that's just what you do. It's normal to buy one. So they helped me get my first one with 25%, which was great. I held on to that, I think, for probably about 4 years. And then I must have then taken out my 25%, and then I went and purchased a property in Coolbellup. So again, another great area where people are investing. And me and my ex-husband, we purchased just a little 3x1 in Coolbellup. I remember paying about 176,000 for it, and you always have regrets when you sell property. And the funny thing is that at the time, we then wanted to upgrade to the next property, which I remember was 302,000, and that was in Melville. And it's funny, like, we couldn't afford to get that property unless we sold it. And I wish I could tell my younger self, if you just push through a little bit harder when you're, 22, if I just pushed forward a little bit more and just kept it, how amazing that would be now. But you don't. So we then moved to a bigger house when we started having children, which was a great property, front house. And then that was when we were about 22, 23. So after only a couple of years, we actually made some pretty good money. I think we made 100,000 on Coolbellup. So 176,000, sold it for probably 270. Then that, gave us to our next one. That was 300. And then when we then had our second child, we wanted to always be closer to South Perth because that's where the business was and that's where I wanted to be. And all my family is in the South Perth Como area. And so we purchased a property for 670,000 in Kensington. Love Kensington, still one of my favourite suburbs, but it was a really old character home. And so we had to do a big reno. So we sold Melville. So we sold that one, bought it for 302,000, sold it, I think, for 620,000. So we had a profit on that, which was great. And then that's what we then spent to extend the home. We didn't own a builder because I was in real estate. I had lots of trades. I didn't need to worry about getting quotes because I knew who I wanted to use. I trusted them. And we're now in this character home with two little kids, and literally, like, the front of the house was just cut off and just a slab put down at the back. And then we did a beautiful reno there. That was great. Love renoing character homes. And then from that, we decided that we wanted a bigger block. So we sold that property for 900 and something. So we didn't really make that much money on it because when we purchased it for 600 odd and we spent probably a good 300 on it, we didn't really make any money, but we still had that equity because that 300 was cash anyway.
Why do you think that was? Was that just because of the market? Because everyone thinks once you put some money into reno, it's going to go up. Like what happened? Was it because of the market or what you bought, or do you know what it came down to?
Probably two things. One would be that we didn't really worry about a budget or anything like that. It was our own place. We just did what we wanted to do. So we spent like a lot of money on induction cooking, which was new at the time. I remember my cooktop was about $4,500, but I wanted induction. So it was probably making silly decisions based on that. But also because we didn't intend to sell, I think that was probably the difference. Like, that was where we were gonna live for a while and it wouldn't have mattered. So and then number 2, the market, which was when I was then found out I was pregnant with a third one and we didn't have enough room in this house. So we sort of felt like we just had to sell. I personally would have children sleep in the same room. My partner, my husband at the time, sorry, he said, he doesn't he didn't want the kids sharing. So he wanted the bigger house. So that was fun. So that was probably the timing of the market was probably an issue, but because we didn't really care, we just moved into a big home. And we moved into a big home in Como, 1,000 square meter block, and 4 bedroom, 2 bathroom. In hindsight, again, and I've only ever regretted selling. I regret selling that one. It was a beautiful big 4 bedroom. It was old, so it still had the slate flooring, but it was in good condition, but dated. Big patio, bar, pool, workshop, everything you could ask, opposite a primary school, just perfect. We paid about a million for that property. I think it was about 1 million. And then we sold it when we got divorced. So we didn't actually make that much money out of that because it was just a situation. But I wish in hindsight that I had pushed myself, but this was 6 years ago. I just couldn't financially on my own at that time hold on to that mortgage. Um, the so that property we ended up selling for about 1.3. So we did slowly, go up the pecking order, I guess, with the houses. And yeah, sold that for 1.3 and then just sort of split that money. So that's sort of, I guess, the housing journey. So definitely starting small, building up, and doing a few exercises down the track. We then I went and rented for the first time, and I hadn't rented before, and I did a deal with one of my landlords and said, if I can take the property for 400 a week, it was in South Perth, and I won't bother you for maintenance under $300. Like anything under 300, I'm going to cover. So really, it's only going to be if the hot water system goes or the aircon goes, I'm going to bother you. And I knew that was this owner's pain point. She hated maintenance, and she was really tight with maintenance. So I thought, that's a good deal for both of us. And she was so beautiful. She said to me, Ash, I will have the place ready for whenever you're ready, because I was selling my family home. She goes, whenever you're ready, the house is going to be empty waiting for you. And she let me move into it once we had settlement, which was so good. So I did that. And then, do you want me to keep on going with what I did
Well,
next?
yeah, I mean, so if we give it a pause, so currently you've bought how many properties up until this point now? But that's about four.
1, 2, 3. That was 4 properties up and yeah, that was till I was 35, call it.
Yeah, and when you started when you were 18, so this is about a 17-year journey, and you've sort of been, yeah, you like you said, you've been sort of buying, trading up, then selling, buying, trading up. So you're obviously saying, yeah, selling is a pain point of yours, but sometimes it's circumstantial as well. So I'm sure those properties would have done okay then. But at the end of the day, so now you're probably left with a pocket of money, and you're renting. So, but you don't own any more homes at this stage, do you?
No, no. So that was, let's call it 35. Yeah. So left with no homes and then having to restart everything again.
Yeah, I probably at that point was the business was probably starting to take off at that point as well, was it? Or just before maybe?
Yeah, no, probably just after that. Yeah, probably just after that it started to, I mean, we were probably at about 500 properties at that point, and then, yeah, so still a very good business. I mean, yeah.
The point I'm getting at is that as a business owner, sometimes you focus in on the business and you're not really focused in on investing into property and vice versa, when you're a PAYG. So I'm just trying to sort of understand, did you have your mindset more into your business maybe at that point? You're buying a number of homes and then, selling them. So I just was trying to get a
Yeah.
feel for what your mindset was.
Yeah, so Bill and I have run a very clean, frugal business. We definitely are not the type of business owners that are putting personal stuff through our books. We don't even put our petrol through the books. We do all that ourselves. Um, we because it's a 50-50, we just find it fair that we just, yeah, we probably could take advantage of the business model a lot more than what we do, but that suits us. So I've never ever seen the business as I sort of don't see it as, well, now I do, but back then I never saw it as mine as such. Like I still, at the end of the day, I could lose that tomorrow. I could have every single owner on the portfolio sell tomorrow, and I wouldn't have the business. So I feel like I was never, and I still am never reliant on the business value, because it can be taken from me tomorrow. Really, that's the way that I see it. So I never take it for granted, at all. I think now we're getting to a really substantial size, and a really good value business, that it would be hard for it to go back to zero. But when you're at that 200, 300, 500 properties, I see business owners where have not moved with the times quick enough, and they're now left with 50 properties and have nothing. So I don't ever want to be too cocky about it. It's gonna be a bonus when I retire, and it's gonna be a fantastic bonus when I retire, but it's definitely not part of my retirement plan. My retirement plan is definitely on building my personal portfolio using the dividends from the business at the moment, to basically get to myself in a position where I'm comfortable retiring, and then that's just gonna be the cream on top. It's absolutely not something I'm relying on.
Absolutely. No, that's amazing. So you've got the business running, churning around, and you're in the rented property. What's your plans from there?
Yeah. So I purchased a commercial property under my self-managed super fund, probably about 5, 6 years ago. So I've got that, and that for me is a little space that maybe when I retire down the track, if I need to have a small little office space, then I've got that space because it's only 38 square meters, but it's on Beaufort Street in Inglewood, which is a really cool little strip. There's a lot of developments happening around it. I think there's a lot of potential. I purchased that in my self-managed super fund for 275,000. I don't know whether the value's gone up. I have a local commercial specialist do me an appraisal because it's always unbiased when someone else does it for you. And I think to be honest, I don't know whether it's actually moved up very much. I think it's sort of low 300s or something like that. But I don't mind because for me, it's going to serve a purpose, a personal purpose for me in the future, and not necessarily something now, but the rent covers the mortgage on it. So, I mean, I'm happy with that. And it's so cute. So I love that little space. So I purchased that one. And it was also like just a little intro into commercial property, without being too silly. It lets me experience sort of what that's like, and definitely keen to do some bigger commercial purchases in the future. We then went, and purchased, so this is now, I've met my partner, and we share the same sort of goals of what we want in the future. So we purchased a property up in Gilderton. So Gilderton is regional. It's an hour north of Perth, and that property we purchased just so our blended families had a bit of respite when we needed it, because we had 6 kids living together, and in one house. So we're like, we need this little house. I fell in love with Gilderton. It's this little town. I think there's 600 people there. The roadhouse is also like the chemist, the bottle shop, the petrol station.
Like a country town. Yeah.
Very much so. Crappy meals at the country club, but you sort of still want to go there to support them.
Yeah.
Yeah, I love it. And there's no letterboxes. It's really awesome. And then what happened was when our neighbours that were there, they knew that I was in real estate, and they asked me to do an appraisal of their property. And I wasn't up that weekend, and Lindsay was talking to them, and they said, "Oh, is Asher around? She's doing an appraisal. We're moving over to Queensland." And he said, "Oh, no, what's going on?" And they go, "Oh, we're moving to Queensland. We need to sell." And so Linz goes, "How much do you want for it?" And they said, "Oh, we just want 450." So Linz calls me up. He goes, "Ash, how much were you going to appraise next door for?" And I said, "Oh, maybe 600,000. He goes, "They only want 450." He goes, "Should I just take it?" I was like, "Yes, shake their hand, take it." And because they were so old school, they just shook his hand. Deal was done. Then what happened, everyone else around, because obviously it's a small little country town, this property was going to be sold. They had offers for more than the 450. And then he was like, "No, I've already shaken his hand. The deal's done." So real old school. So he was like, "Yep, let's grab that," because that was better suited for us. It was a bigger home. And it was, yeah, it was just better for us. So we purchased that one. That's going to be where we retire. So that's we go up there every second weekend. So the value of that one doesn't matter too much, but it is, we purchased for 450,000 and the last valuation I think was 650,000. So that's great. The plan is that we'll have that paid off before we retire, and that'll be easy to do because there's only probably 100,000 left for each of us. And then the little house we did Airbnb, and and then we rented it out full time as well. So we've had a couple of rentals in there, renters in there, and we only recently just sold that one. So we sold that. And again, circumstantial. Lynn's wanted to buy more shares in his company, so that was ideal. So we sold that one, and then I've now got that money sitting in the bank account. So but you can maybe consult me and tell me what I should do with it. But and then so we've got Gilderton, I've got the commercial and the self-managed super fund. And then in September last year, I have this money. So actually I'm really, really fortunate, to be honest. My mum sold her house. Now, my mum, after her separation, has done incredibly well with her buying property and just taking the risk and working hard. She sold her property in South Perth, and actually, can I tell you a real funny story about this? Because it's a bit of a
Yeah.
story. So when my parents separated, my dad moved into our Kelmscott. So Kelmscott's an area that a lot of people know of, Kelmscott House. And he wasn't paying rent. And this was part of their settlement. And I remember saying to my mum, just kick him out, just kick him out. No, he's your father, blah, blah. So one day we get a phone call to say that the house is burnt down. The fire brigade are there and the house is on fire. And so in my mind, this is really mean. My dad's past sins, and I love my dad dearly, where, there was never any problem there. It was just all tongue in cheek. But in my head, I'm thinking, oh, like now we get to get him out and he can go find somewhere else and make it his own problem, his housing. The house burns down. My mum has insurance on this property. She gets a full payout of 300,000 for the house, the value of the house. But then she finds out that it's a subdividable block. So she's like, great. So she sold both sides of the block, and she probably got, I don't know, 600,000 cash out of this property, which was like,
Just for land, two lots of land. Yeah.
yeah, so it was fantastic. So then what she did is, with this money, she had a very old house in South Perth, like a really old weatherboard. She thought, well, I think she was renting at the time, so she's like, I'll build on this property and I will use that cash that I've got to build. Perfect. Like, it's funny how things happen for a reason, and she's a good person. So she deserves this. Like, she gave my dad, I think, $50,000, and he went and purchased like a caravan park home or something like that. And she built this property. So now she's got this massive big 2-story home with really no mortgage on it. And she lived in that for a long time. And actually, that's when my dad passed. So she had this sentimental value for it. But then one day she said, yeah, I don't need this anymore. I'm going to sell it. So she sold this home last year, but she didn't want the money for it because it was sort of a bit, she didn't need it. And it was a bit, insurance money, all of those things.
Yeah, ethical. Yeah.
Yeah. So she just shared the money out between all of us kids. So the 4 of us kids, we all received $300,000, which was
Amazing.
very lucky. Very
Yeah.
lucky.
Yeah. Good on mum.
And there's actually a book that I'm just reading, which I think everyone should read, and it's called Die with Zero. Have you heard of that one?
I've read it, and
Okay.
I'm a big fan. I'm a big fan. There's some really interesting points to think about. Yeah, things
Yep.
makes you think about your life and how you're running it, for sure.
I recommend it for everyone. My mum's a living, breathing example of Die with Zero. So she gives her money, away. So anyway, so late last year I had this money. I'm living with Lynn's. I'm like, what do I do? I actually, funny enough, I felt very, very uncomfortable having this money in my bank account. I didn't like it. It didn't feel good. I don't like having money. I don't like not having money. Based on my upbringing, and yeah, very, very uncomfortable feeling. So I was like, I've got to get rid of it. When I say get rid of it, I've got to go buy property with it.
Not at the casino yet.
So I thought I'll look at 2 little investment properties. I've got enough to put some decent deposit on 2 properties. And because all you investors are still out looking and that price range of 500,000, you're all putting in stupid offers of 600,000. And I didn't want to put a stupid offer of 600,000. So I thought to myself, okay, I need to change my range. What range are you investors not looking in so I can buy something, without all that competition? So I look in the 900 to a mil price range and I find a home. And just like you all, I put my money where my mouth is and I put an offer in without seeing this property, despite the property only being around the corner, 5 minutes away from work. And I put the offer in and the agent calls me up and he goes, Ash, are you sure you don't want to look at it? And I said, Matt, can I use the front living room as a bedroom? Because it was a 3x2 with 2 living areas. He goes, yep, absolutely. I said, put my offer through. I'm happy with it. I want you to go ahead. So I told him my story, my situation, put both the offers through and mine got accepted. So now I have this hard decision. Do I rent it out or do I move out of where I'm living with Linz? Like, we're together. We're still together. We're not separated. But do I move out because this is going to be a lot easier for me? My kids can walk to school. My kids are close to their friends. Like, it's a bit backwards, but is this the most mature decision to make at this time, of my life with my youngest moving into high school? And I decided to move out and move into this property instead. And it was probably one of the smartest things I've ever done. So Linz and I now have this, we just have to make sure we see each other once a week. We see each other once a week. Highly recommend a part-time partner. It's ideal. You get your own space and you still get to see them once a week. And it just works really, really well for us. But it's because we share that same goal that we're going to live in Gilderton, when we retire, and we go up there every second weekend anyway together. So this property that I've got now, I feel like I did really well. I paid 965,000 for it. Again, it was in the market where the investors weren't really looking, so I felt like I got a bit more of a bargain. I didn't feel like I overpaid or anything. And the house behind just recently sold for about 1.3, I think it was. So, and that's just the same sort of property as mine. So I think that I've done really, really well with this one. And this will be what I tell my kids will be their forever home. This is the home where that I'll just keep as my Perth base. The kids will always have a roof over their head here and I won't have any need to sell it or do anything. And I've had enough of selling properties, so I don't plan to do that. And yeah, I'm in control of this one because it's just all in my name. And so that is where I'm at now. But now from a business point of view with dividends, we've got a large amount of dividends due to be paid again. So now it's again purchasing. So my next 2 purchases that I'll be making will be in that 500,000, maybe 700,000 mark. I'll see. I think 700's a price point where I feel like I can get something pretty good for that price. And my plan is to purchase 3 or 4 more properties, but inside a trust. So with business and with our dividends, they go into a bucket company.
Mm.
And I plan to do that. And I plan to do that obviously for tax reasons. But also I want the security for my children if they ever use the properties or if they ever live in them, that is owned by the company and not by them personally for, just to protect them financially as well. I know people think that's a bit morbid to say, but I've just worked so hard. I don't want anyone to take that from me or the kids.
Yeah, I've gone down that road, so that's definitely not. That's definitely a very, very important consideration. I agree. Well, question for you: out of those next few properties that you're planning to buy, would you buy any interstate?
I would consider Melbourne, and I would, but I'm not just saying, so I would 100% have to use a buyer's agent in Melbourne because from what it sounds like is it's very specific where you should buy. I would consider that, but I guess for me, buying properties where they have a other purpose other than just making money is something that's a factor for me because if the market doesn't go well, the housing market doesn't go well, then I don't really care because there's another reason for having it. So, with Gilderton, for example, if that doesn't perform well, I don't actually really care. I'm not driven by that growth because I'm going to live in it. With houses in Perth, I don't care whether they've got that growth in it because the kids, maybe that's where the kids will live, each of the kids will live when they get older. So it doesn't really matter. So I guess that's probably the way that is probably bad investing, because I'm not doing it for any sort of capital gain. And I don't necessarily want the growth in it. All I want is for my family to have a shelter, and no mortgage ultimately. So I will continue with work to use those dividends while we've got the business to pay them off, so that when I retire, I'll be debt free. But for me, that's the only thing I would take into account. If I was buying in Melbourne, then I would be buying it to make money, because I don't have a purpose for
Yeah.
anyone to use or live in it, if
Yeah.
that makes sense. It's
Yeah.
probably playing a bit safe though.
Oh, look, everyone's got their reasons, and the thing is, you're still investing in property, and if you hold it obviously for the long term, you're going to do well out of it regardless. And if you've got certain properties for certain reasons, I think that's fantastic. I think that's very inspirational. You're obviously thinking about your family a lot as well, and not just thinking about how much it's all going to grow and what am I going to do with it. Because as you've just pointed out with Diamond Zero, with the people who do read it, a lot of people, are left with a lot of money that they don't use, and I think you're using it, for the best reasons for yourself. So, no issues with that, and I think, yeah, you'll do well out of it anyway.
Yeah, the focus for me is only to pay it off and have some cash flow from it. It's not to get to have any, because I'll have the equity in it anyway, because I'll have no mortgage. So for me, I don't need it to be anymore. And I guess, yeah, any investment portfolio that I've got, really, I'm just basing it on the value of when I buy it, and anything else will be a bonus, but I'm not driven by that.
Yeah, and I think, look, once you get to a few properties, you'll have options either way. So, so that all makes sense to me. So that's quite a amazing story. I didn't actually realize all the sort of different definitions and chapters of your property journey that you've gone through, and it's really interesting to me. So you've gone through obviously a lot of the selling, the buying, and now you're at a point where you've bought your amazing home, and you've got some really really cool plans. Moving forward, you're running a great business. Shout out to Soko again. Anyone who's thinking of using a property manager in Perth, they're fantastic. They manage, yeah, 3 of my properties there. So, you guys are doing an amazing job. And, yeah, look, thanks for sharing your story, Ashley. It was really cool.
No worries. And then, yeah, hopefully it helps people. And I think if anyone, wants to reach out, it's always good to speak to property managers that have, got, not, I'm not saying that it's, a good property manager has to have investment portfolio, but it can definitely just give that little bit of confidence to clients as well. When you sort of can speak the same lingo, and when you can feel the same emotion that investors are going through, when, there's something emotionally stressful, you get it a bit more than what you would if I was a property manager who just rented, if that makes sense. Not that I want to bag those people though either, because they're still great, but there's a difference with the emotional side of it.
Yeah, I think, knowing you, Ash, like, your passion for property is second to none. You've always got these theories as well that you keep coming up with and wanting to talk about. So, that's, you can see it, that's your real passion there. And I think you're obviously in the right game. So thanks for coming on. I really appreciate yourself coming on. You're obviously well renowned in this industry, and you've done a great job for me personally and professionally as well through my, buyer's agency as well. So thanks again.
Amazing. Thanks for having me.
No worries. Thanks, guys, for tuning in, and we'll see you on the next episode. Cheers. Hey, guys, thanks for tuning in. If you enjoyed the chat, feel free to drop us a rating on Spotify or wherever you listen. It helps us reach more listeners to help them with their journey. Catch you in the next episode.